The countries of the G7 and the European Union intend to introduce new sanctions against Russia. They may affect gas pipelines, writes Financial Times, citing sources close to the negotiations. The G7 is expected to ban imports of Russian gas via pipelines, where Moscow previously cut supplies and provoked an energy crisis in Europe. The sanctions will mainly affect gas supplies to Poland and Germany.
A draft G7 statement seen by the Financial Times says the group of leading economies will continue to reduce the use of Russian energy and prevent the reopening of Russian pipelines previously closed due to Russia's use of energy as a weapon. Henry Foy, David Shepard and Alice Hancock for Financial Times.
The G7 leaders intend to make the final decision on the gas embargo at the summit in Hiroshima, which will be held on May 19. If decided, these restrictions will be the first to target Moscow's pipeline exports since the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war. However, due to Hungary's threats that it will block a new anti-Russian sanctions package, the gas issue may be partially agreed upon, analyst Andriy Mazuvets believes.
Нефтегазовые доходы России.
Oil and gas revenues in Russia for this month of 2023 have decreased by half, even more than half, by 52% compared to the previous year. Even without a complete ban on Russian gas imports by pipeline to Europe, Russia's revenues are still falling. And what is important for us is that production is falling. And this is a much more serious challenge for our enemies than a temporary reduction in pipeline gas supplies. Because to return production to previous levels, and oil and gas will be quite problematic.
The European Union is preparing an 11th package of sanctions against Russia to enable Moscow's attempts to circumvent restrictive measures. European Commissioner for Financial Services, Financial Stability and Capital Markets, Merit McGuinness, said that the Russian military machine is already suffering from a lack of finance and technology, which is causing Russia problems on the battlefield.
We need to make sure they don't find ways to circumvent our sanctions and repeatedly emphasize that the deeper our sanctions, the stronger they are. The more Russia will look for ways to circumvent them through other countries or the other bank accounts. Merit McGuinness, European Commissioner for Financial Services, Financial Stability and Capital Markets, in an interview with CNBC.
On the eve of the summit of G7 leaders on May 13th, a meeting on the finance ministers of the United States and Japan was held, where the parties, among other things, agreed to focus on closing loopholes in existing sanctions.
We hope to be able to discuss the issues we face in macroeconomic management, sanctions against Russia and support for Ukraine, as well as debt issues and strengthening the supply chain.
The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also plans to attend the international summit in Hiroshima. There he will meet with the leaders of the European Union and G7 countries and will talk about increasing assistance to Ukraine, which is fighting Russian aggression.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will undertake a packed tour of international engagements this week to drive economic growth and investment in the UK, shore up support for Ukraine and address critical global challenges, from a press release from the UK Prime Minister's office.
The day before, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky had a conversation with Rishi Sunak, during which the positions of the two countries were coordinated before the upcoming international events. Volodymyr Zelensky in particular said that the Russian occupiers are internally ready to defeat.
They have already lost this war in their minds. We must pressure them so that their sense of defeat turns into their flight, their mistakes into their losses.
At the same time, Ukraine's allies emphasize that the EU does not and will not be tired of Ukraine. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Josep Borrell said at a briefing in Stockholm that in order to win the war, Ukraine needs to provide not only short-term, but also long-term support tools.
And I want to send a clear message to Putin. There is no and will not be fatigue. We will continue supporting Ukraine as much as Ukraine needs for as long as needed. I think it's important to repeat some narrative. There is an aggressor and an aggressed. Ukraine is a victim and Russia is the aggressor. Russia doesn't want to stop fighting, and Ukraine cannot stop fighting.
The head of EU diplomacy also said that the European Union would help Kyiv until the very victory and the return of all territories temporarily occupied by Russia. Reported by Roman Smoler, Natalia Belokudra, UATV News.